Right.
everything. She didn't look like she was in a good place.
The transformation is not necessarily how it's being perceived from outsider. It's how they have changed the worldview. And that's really an important element, I would say. For the woman who had, for instance, I don't know whether it was the same woman, I have interviewed two of the ones who were in this same film. So one of them had, and this would be the transformation. Both were raped very young, both of them. Both had children born out of rape. One of them, although she was in the center, and both of them were in this particular center that we have seen, the biggest trauma for one of them was that the social service agencies took her children away because she was found an unfit mother. She has a lot of, as we say, post-traumatic stress, very visible medical conditions that are really, but she's also, although she's struggling, and she's talking about that time of struggle, she's happily married. She's not ostracized from her community. She's well accepted. The other one would say she would never believe that her father would welcome her child that was born out of rape to be a member of that community. And that would be absolutely unthinkable if it happened 20 or 30 years ago. One aspect that I didn't quite really focus here is, but it is one of the findings, that in Bosnia the trauma of rape, although it was very, very open, but and there was all of these controversies, but the community really came together. The community is just to say, let's say, the imams, the local imams would issue fatwas, which is an order to protect these women, which is also very unusual in that. So the rape was a communally shared trauma. It wasn't something and it was not that way at first. I'm looking at the journey that was since 1992 to now. It was very different in 95 or 96. They just got this aspect of civilian war victims 2 years ago. So this particular woman who, if she had a child born out of rape, she either would have to give up the child, right, to give it for adoption, which some women did, because they did, or like for the women who were in this center, and I'm not saying that it happened, this is, again, a very small sample of 4 centers who were part of that trigger for them. But being able to live very happy, fulfilled life, even if they have chosen to be single or to be divorced, but chosen to rear the children, or that in this case, her child, I'm pretty sure that woman whose children were taken away, that's still for her a huge struggle. So there is still the pain that is, but the transformation is very visible in terms of her own life and the way how it looks now and how it would look in the different conditions. If she wouldn't have that particular amount of money, where 350 various organizations and groups were involved, and a lot of women survivors had to put their names down, just like victims of rape. So that was public. And that's unheard of. They would have to hide. They would eventually tell their mother-in-laws, their mothers, or somebody very privately. So that's part of the transformation. That rape was very public in this time. It was happening in front of the eyes of the whole world, and they had their own personal struggles in it. Not necessarily to say that was the losses and the trauma that they felt very often would be, in terms of the levels of trauma, it will be something else for them, not necessarily rape itself. Again, the critique of the feminist scholarship and feminist intervention now goes, Janet Healy is one of them, who is a feminist jurist from Harvard University. She talks about this issue, whether this whole punitive element of convicting rape in war was useful for feminism? Was it useful for these women who live in their lives there? So there is a lot of academicians and theoretical debate around that. Whether this was really something that was driving in particular period of time, that's not necessarily an issue that's being covered anymore, because this legal victory of having the rape survivors being treated in conflict, rape being recognized as a war crimes against humanity was the most important aspect of it. I wouldn't say, I didn't necessarily, and this whole other aspect where survivors were used and victims were used, you run into these kinds of frameworks all the time and do the reading. And that's, I would say, very upsetting part. In some ways, to me, it depends, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. For me, I really wanted to have the stories of, my survivors, my participants, to come across. So the transformation is incredibly visible if you look at through the conditions that there are.
Transformation of the society.
And it's just, and their own lives, and how they view their lives. Like they would have had totally different lives, with rape or without rape, if there was not this advocacy, if there were not all of this wonderful women's intervention, if you want to call, or even feminist intervention in most of the cases. So there is no doubt about that in my mind, that this is very different. Thank you.
Thank you.
But again, this is I will make it available. I have gotten to all the proofreading and
been there, done that. Right. It's a long haul.
that's the part. Yes, Dora.
Well, I guess that's one of my questions. What happens to your dissertation? Does it just sit on a shelf and it collects dust, or does it come up? Where does it go next?
Some of my faculty readers want me to make a book. I don't have the time for that. That's something that some people do. It's already a book that once it's published, but it's also not for general public. The format of dissertation is not something that you can read on a plane ride. And my husband is making faces here. However, I would say I will probably try to publicize it, some academic articles, because I also have branched some accomplishments in this research, but then also make it available to general public.
Do you still send them to University of Michigan?
Yes, and that's the most important part is it is public, because there is going to be a link, and every scholar can get it. So it's and of course everybody who has a computer will get that link, and there is a PDF, and everything is there. And I will have a couple of copies nicely bundled, I think.
Oh, but it will be in PDF form.
It will be.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. So this is the university. That's my next.
Things have changed. Medicine did this whole thing, so.
No, not really. Some things never change.
They didn't have PDFs back when
Oh, no,
it's 20 years ago.
So now it's PDF.
Everything is PDF.
Well, it's important just because it still happens.
This is other aspect. It's whether the punitive, and this is where a lot of this whole other aspect about when we have all of these wonderful laws, when we have the ways of punishing people, do we modify behavior, but we don't necessarily change the attitudes. And changing the attitudes doesn't necessarily happen with just punitively sending people in jail or places like that. So that is a big